From our State House studio in Montgomery, I'm Todd Stacy. Welcome to Capitol Journal. It has been a whirlwind week in the world of politics, starting with President Donald Trump's inauguration on Monday. Many Alabamians traveled to Washington, D.C. for the festivities, but the cold weather forced the ceremony inside the Capitol Rotunda.
From this day forward, our country will flourish and be respected again all over the world. We will be the envy of every nation, and we will not allow ourselves to be taken advantage of any longer. During every single day of the Trump administration, I will very simply put America first. Our sovereignty will be reclaimed. Our safety will be restored. The scales of justice will be rebalanced. The vicious, violent, and unfair weaponization of the Justice Department and our government will end. And our top priority will be to create a nation that is proud, prosperous, and free. America will soon be greater, stronger, and far more exceptional than ever before.
I'll speak with State Representative Susan DuBose, who was on hand for the festivities, later in the show. We're a few days into the new Trump administration, and Alabama's Republican members are eager to implement the president's policies. Some of our congressmen are focused on securing the border, tackling energy policy, and bolstering the country's defense capabilities. Capitol Journal's Alex Engel reports from there on Capitol Hill.
Outside the Capitol here was pretty quiet on Monday as the scaled-down inauguration ceremony happened inside the Capitol Rotunda. Alabama's delegation was inside for that event, and some GOP members explained what they're hoping Trump will tackle first. Much of D.C. was jubilant inauguration day as Trump was sworn in.
So help me God. Congratulations.
A much different scene than in 2017. Alabama's GOP lawmakers were also feeling that excitement.
There was a sense of history there that I haven't gotten in other inaugural ceremonies, and you just sense that something has changed.
Trump signed a slew of executive orders this week, including declaring a national emergency at the southern border, suspending the TikTok ban, and unleashing American energy, which aims to increase energy production. Congressman Gary Palmer says he talked with the Trump team during the campaign about his energy priorities.
We'll use the Defense Production Act so that we can immediately permit more energy production and eventually permit mining for critical minerals from Earth, because we're dangerously reliant on China.
Congressman Mike Rogers, chairman of the House Armed Services Committee, says he looks forward to bolstering America's defense presence under Trump.
That's going to be good for Alabama because, you know, we have a large defense presence in our state. So it's going to be good for our country from a national security standpoint.
Rogers also says he supports the president's efforts to find an American company to buy the popular app TikTok.
It's not my thing, but my kids are crazy about it. And I understand that it's a platform that a lot of Americans enjoy using, but it is controlled by the Chinese Communist Party and owned by them, and that cannot be allowed.
Alabama's delegation is also focused on immigration policy.
People are very frustrated with what the past administration allowed to occur at that southern border, and now Donald Trump's fixing to start the process to fix this.
The state's House delegation unanimously supported Senator Katie Britt's Laken Riley Act Wednesday. 46 Democrats voted for the bill, including Representatives Shamari Figures and Terry Sewell. It passed the Senate earlier this week, also with bipartisan support. The bill will require ICE to detain undocumented immigrants who commit crimes such as theft or shoplifting. It now heads to President Trump to sign into law. Reporting on Capitol Hill, Alex Engel, Capitol Journal.
Thank you, Alex. So great having our own APT reporter right there on Capitol Hill. Another update on committees for the Alabama delegation in this 119th Congress. These are more on the subcommittee level. As part of her service on the Senate Banking Committee, Senator Katie Britt picks up a gavel and will chair the Subcommittee on Housing, Transportation, and Community Development. As part of his service on the Energy and Commerce Committee, Congressman Gary Palmer will chair the Subcommittee on Oversight and Investigations. He'll also have a seat on the Energy and Environment Subcommittee. And on his Committee on Oversight and Government Reform, Palmer will sit on the subcommittees for Government Operations and Economic Growth, Energy Policy, and Regulatory Affairs. And as part of his service on the Appropriations Committee, Congressman Dale Strong will sit on the subcommittees for Commerce, Justice, and Science, Transportation, Housing, and Urban Development, and the Legislative Branch. And Congressman Shamari Figures has been named Vice-Ranking Member for the Transportation and Infrastructure Subcommittee on Highways and Transit. I'll talk more with Capitol Hill veteran Stephen Boyd about these developments later in the show. Last week, it was North Alabama dealing with snow and ice. This week, South Alabama got more than its share of winter weather. With the legislative session less than 2 weeks away, some are preparing for what happens if the weather makes it difficult to travel to Montgomery. Capitol Journal's Randy Scott reports.
Many Alabama residents woke up to this sight Tuesday morning. Not a dusting of snow, but a significant amount covering the ground and roads. From the Gulf Coast to central Alabama, it caused a lot of buildings, businesses, and state government agencies to not open. But what happens when the business of government is affected, such as the case in 2014's snow and ice storm?
It started affecting travel, and the situation was not enough members could get to Montgomery to conduct business.
In 2020, it was a storm of a different type, dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic. Two events, one weather, the other a health issue.
Leadership decided it may not be a good idea to bring everybody back with this virus running rampant, and it was growing day by day, the number of hospitalizations and deaths here in Alabama.
There's a government agency that has as a part of its motto, neither rain, sleet, snow, ice will stop it from doing its job. But what about other agencies? What about agencies dealing with leadership, such as the administration, such as the legislature? How do they handle inclement weather? Clay Redden is the public information officer for the Alabama House of Representatives.
We really need to have a contingency plan. I mean, there was a contingency plan in case the state was attacked with nuclear weapons, but there was for the legislature to meet in that event. There was no contingency plan if ice blocked the roads.
The idea, to keep the people's business flowing despite problems popping up.
If there's no quorum or a lack of a quorum in the House, and the governor has declared a state of emergency in accordance with state law, then the speaker is allowed to set the time and date of the next meeting of the House,
giving lawmakers a chance to keep work days and stay safe while doing their jobs.
The speaker could have done the same thing with that as was done during the pandemic, and that is tell members to stay home, don't venture out, it's too dangerous. And he would set the date of the session, probably given the situation we have right now with snow still on the ground in Mobile, probably will come back next week, the following week.
In Montgomery, Randy Scott, Capitol Journal.
Thank you, Randy. And session will be here before we know it. And if that's your jam, it's time to make that dental visit or the trip to the dry cleaners, because we are all about to be super busy. Here are a few key dates to keep in mind as the session approaches. Tuesday, February 4th is the first day of session. That also means Governor Kay Ivey's State of the State address to the legislature. Of course, we'll be carrying that live here on Alabama Public Television. February 5th starts the legislative budget hearings. That's also the day of our legislative issues breakfast, and if you're in the Montgomery area, you won't want to miss that. Seeing as how it worked out pretty well last year, there again are 2 spring break weeks this year, March 10th through 14th and March 24th through 28th. Under the Constitution, the legislature has 105 calendar days to fit in 30 possible meeting days. That means the last possible day of the session is May 19th. Of course, the legislature could end before then, but usually they go pretty close right up until that last day. One issue that could be on the table this year is modernizing the way Alabama public schools are funded. A legislative commission is recommending a new approach that blends the current funding system with additional resources for students who face greater challenges. As Capitol Journal's Jeff Sanders explains, there are growing concerns about fairness and effectiveness in education funding.
For nearly 3 decades, Alabama's foundation program has been the backbone of school funding. But lawmakers on the Legislative Study Commission on Modernizing K-12 School Education say it's overdue for a change. Their solution? Likely a hybrid model that keeps the core formula but adds extra funding to meet specific student needs.
As you know, we have a resource-based model. We're one of 5 or 6 states that does not have a student-based model. Our model is, the way we fund education today, is not designed and based on student needs, hasn't changed in 30 years, and certainly the education platform and the needs that we've seen in the public schools have changed in that time.
The commission weighed 3 options: sticking with the current system, replacing it entirely with a needs-based model, or combining the two. Lawmakers are leaning toward the hybrid route, aiming to direct more resources to areas of greatest need while safeguarding existing funding streams for local districts.
And so by doing this, it allows us to potentially double the amount of money we're allocating for those needs, but we also have the accountability measures in place where the schools that have the students with those needs are getting the funds rather than just the ones that knew how to apply for the grant, knew the deadlines, got the money, and those types of things.
$1,000 more per pupil, research shows, through the school finance reform efforts, has the same effect on outcomes as 72 additional days of learning.
Accountability, however, remains a key concern. Lawmakers want to ensure these targeted dollars are spent on their intended purposes, not unrelated expenses.
I think as long as we can say that we have to pin it down, that if I give you money for English learners, then you have to use it for English learners. If you do it for poverty on weight, you have to spend that money in that area. And I think that some of the conversations that I've been hearing is leave it in the air that, well, they'll get this money and they won't spend it on what they're supposed to spend it on. So I appreciate y'all addressing that.
In the long run, lawmakers argue investing more strategically in education could pay dividends for the state's workforce and economy.
If I have grandchildren now, it's a whole different world, and I want them to experience the best right here in our state. I don't want them to have to move or go anywhere else or think that the grass is greener when we can grow it right here.
The commission plans to finalize its report ahead of the upcoming legislative session, which starts in early February. For Capitol Journal, I'm Jeff Sanders reporting.
Thank you, Jeff. And joining me next to talk about that issue in more depth is Trisha Powell-Crane, APT's senior education reporter. Trish, thanks for coming on the show.
Great to see you. Thanks.
Okay, so this interesting development with education funding, the future of education funding. It sounded like there are 3 kind of options here. You know, go big, go kind of middle road, don't go at all.
Right, right.
What do you see as the most likely path the legislature might take?
Listening to the discussion, it does sound like lawmakers are leaning towards this hybrid model, what they're calling a hybrid model, which would keep the current funding system, the foundation program, in place, maybe tweak it a little bit, and then add some targeted funding based on the number of students in different sort of categories, if you will, that each system has.
Mm-hmm. Can we call that the Goldilocks approach, maybe?
Yes, yes, yes.
That's interesting, and it's so important, and obviously anything dealing with education and what we do in education, especially with funding, is going to be controversial. It's going to be nitpicked. Right, right. Curious about this portion. Look, this is taxpayer money. Mm-hmm. We have increased spending over the years, but based on your reporting, you know, inflation has also taken quite a bit of that. Right, right. So every time budgets go up, I know the budget hawks in the legislature want to know, how is this money being used? Can we have some accountability in terms of what we are committing taxpayer money for? As these discussions go forward, is there talk about accountability and ensuring the money we're spending is actually being used?
Absolutely, yes, that came up. They all agree that if we're going to put more money into education, we need to see measurable outcomes improve, right? And there is acknowledgement that some of these measurable outcomes are already improving because of the Literacy Act and the Numeracy Act. And they didn't talk specifics, what that might look like, but they all agreed, we need more accountability with more money.
Mm-hmm. Well, I definitely understand that, and we all want to see the numbers go up. But yeah, if you spend more, you're investing more. Certainly, you want to see those numbers, and it can take time. And so, well, speaking of time, what kind of timeline do you think we're realistically on? Could we actually see a bill to do that this legislative session?
Well, the Chairman Garrett and Chairman Orr, did say that yes, we could see a bill this legislative session. It would depend on Governor Ivey as well,
Sure.
right? And so they're going to come back with a report. This commission is going to come back with a report on February the 4th. They said they'll get together and vote on this, these recommendations. They'll make the recommendation to the legislature, and then it will be up to them. Do we want to draft a bill? Do we want to make this actually happen? Chairman Orr and Garrett were quick to say, we have no bill at this point. We're just studying whether or not we could actually do this.
Yeah, February 4th, which is the first day of the legislative session.
Right.
It's really interesting. I don't think anybody can blame Chairman Orr and Chairman Garrett of rushing this. There has been a lot of discussion, a lot of meetings. They've really taken their time and been deliberate, and I think that's worth mentioning.
Absolutely, and I think one important point came up today, and it's the first time I've heard it. Chairman Garrett said, we did this study back in 2013. There was a group, Augenblick, and I'm going to mess the other names up, but in 2013, State Department hired them to do a study. And in 2015, the group came out with their recommendations, and Chairman Garrett said, we are basically doing exactly what they said we need to do, minus the raising taxes, right? They all agree on the premise that it is needed. We need to have more targeted funding towards student needs.
Mm-hmm. Yep, well, we'll see. Thank you so much for your analysis, and we'll just watch and see what happens.
Thanks, Todd.
And we'll be right back with this week's guests.
You can watch past episodes of Capital Journal online at video.aptv.org. Capital Journal episodes are also available on APTV's free mobile app. You can also connect with Capital Journal and link to past episodes on Capital Journal's Facebook page. And you can listen to past episodes of Capital Journal when you're driving or on the go with Capital Journal podcasts. Keep up with what's happening with Capital Journal.
My son's name is Nathan. Nathan is a welder. He enjoys it, loves it. So my plan is that he would graduate from private high school and go on to Auburn University, which is where everyone on his dad's side of the family goes to college. It's very obvious now that I have the ability to step back. He does much better hands-on learning. Nathan had taken a tour at a local career technical school and was very interested in the welding program. My initial reaction about a career technical school was probably the farthest from the truth. I was projecting my thoughts onto him and my expectations onto him, and it really took a lot of mom maturity to step back and just step up and be there for him. After high school, Nathan found a welding job very quickly. I would say within 3 weeks of graduation, he was working for a local contractor. I remember having a conversation with my own mother, and she said, "Is there really any money in welding? What exactly do welders do?" So as a 19-year-old, he's making $47 an hour. Right. So I thought I was raising a CEO, and as it turned out, I was raising a welder. Who knew? Nathan knew.
World War II-era Tuskegee Airmen were the first African-American pilots in U.S. military service. Because Tuskegee was the only training facility for black pilots in the United States during World War II, potential pilots came from all over the country. The first African-American flying unit was the 99th Fighter Squadron, which deployed in the spring of 1943. The 99th earned a Distinguished Unit Citation, flying missions against enemy targets over Italy. The second flying unit, the 332nd Fighter Group, flew several successful bomber escort missions throughout the war. Its P-51 fighters had distinctively painted red tails, earning the unit and its planes the nickname Red Tails. In 1948, President Truman issued an executive order mandating the racial integration of all military services. The way was paved by the Tuskegee Airmen of World War II, and in 2007, President Bush collectively awarded them a Congressional Gold Medal.
Welcome back to Capitol Journal. Joining me next is State Representative Susan DuBose from Hoover. Representative, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me, Todd. Been looking forward to it.
Well, I know you've returned from Washington this week, where you were up at the nation's capital enjoying inaugural festivities. I guess it all got moved in to the rotunda, but there was still a lot going on in D.C., I'm sure.
Oh, that's right. It was still such a great celebration. I was up there with my husband. Several of the Republican women from our state were there. We had a lot of legislators up there, so it was definitely a celebratory atmosphere. The streets were festive. Everybody was happy in spite of the cold weather. But we had a couple of great balls to go to. Southern States Ball was a welcome ball Saturday night, full of people from the Southern States, Alabama. Sunday night, we had another gala that was basically for the Southern States. It's called our inaugural gala. And then my husband and I watched the inauguration from Heritage Foundation. Mm-hmm. They have an office just a couple of blocks from the Capitol, and they had a big watch party. And that was so much fun, just being with so many patriotic Americans. I would have loved to have been on the lawn. I hated that it was canceled. You know, we were prepared for the cold. Mm-hmm. We had our mittens and our long underwear, and I mean, we were good to go. And I went 8 years ago, and there is nothing like sitting on that lawn, seeing that beautiful Capitol with the patriotic draping and hearing our bands play the patriotic music. I mean, there's nothing like that. So I was disappointed to miss that, but you know what? The important thing is Trump is now our president, and he got to work.
Oh, no kidding about that. And we've been talking all through that. At least you were a little warmer than you would have been watching.
It was fun. You know, we had a little bit of breakfast, nice refreshment, so I cannot complain.
Well, I wanted to ask you about something that you've been involved in, really spearheaded here, and that is Girls' Day at the Capitol. I guess it's the second year it's happened this year.
That's correct.
It looks fantastic in terms of inviting young women to really engage in government and all that. Talk about Girls' Day at the Capitol, how it started and what happened here in the second year.
Yeah, so I partnered with Miss Alabama's Teen to do this event. We did it last year. We've done it again this year. Allie Mims is Miss Alabama's Teen this year. And I have to give a shout out to her because she won first alternate in Miss America's Teen, as we had Abby Stockard win Miss America from Alabama. So, I mean, these are outstanding women. And I've worked with this organization enough to know that I wanted to partner with these girls. And so what we do is invite girls 6th through 12th grade to come down to the Capitol and see women leaders and see role models, women in government. I also partner with all the other female legislators. They come and bring girls from their district. So it's an opportunity for them to see women as decision makers in our state. Mm-hmm. Governor Ivey's office has been really, really gracious partnering with us. We also were able to take the girls to the governor's mansion, tour that, see the beautiful Christmas decorations. We usually time this around Christmas, so we're going to do it next year. We've already got the date set. It'll be December 16th. But the main thing is for them to start thinking about careers, not just as a, you know, in politics necessarily, but all the other parts of government that take place down here in Montgomery and nationwide. And so, you know, we even took them to this floor of the House, let them sit in a desk and vote on an issue and talk to them about just some of the issues that we face while we're down there. Next year, they said, we want to see y'all do an actual debate. So we're going to go a little bit further and debate an issue for them to just kind of see exactly what it is we do. But it's so much fun, and I really think it's something that you know, I can give back to the state, give back to the girls, and have them participate in statewide.
Maybe some of them are going to be sitting in your shoes
I hope
someday.
so.
Yeah.
We need more women. That's
Right.
what we talk about. You know, less than 20% of our body are females, and we're one of the lowest in the nation as far as female legislators. And so that's really how it started, but it's grown from there.
Well, speaking of women, you had legislation this past year really defining in the state law. It was called What is a Woman Act, really leaning in on these transgender type issues, but defining once and for all this, you know, what a biological woman is. It's going to be back. You said you're going to bring it back. It actually passed the House, I guess, last year.
That's right.
But what's interesting about that is that now, since Trump has taken office, he's had an executive order defining, and I guess, you know, for his proclamation, you know, what male and female on the federal level. So, given that he's done that by executive order, you think your bill's still necessary at the state level?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm really appreciative of President Trump because he has given light to this issue. And it was one of the very first executive orders that he signed. And he talked about this on his campaign trail. We've talked about it throughout the state of Alabama. Attorney General Marshall has talked about it. The Lieutenant Governor has talked about it, in that there are only two sexes. Sex is fixed, and there's only male and female. And we always took that meaning for granted. We never had it codified before. But so President Trump has signed an executive order which only affects the federal level. We do need to pass this law because this will affect state agencies and state law. So we need to properly define male and female by the biological definition, codify it into Alabama law, and male, female, man, woman, mother, father, all those traditional terms, we need to pass this bill and have it actually codified into our law. It's a transparency bill, basically, so that when you see the sign man, woman, male, female, you know what that means.
Mm-hmm. Now, folks in the LBGT community they do, in fact, all the time say bills like this, efforts like this, put them at risk somehow. What do you say to criticisms of your bill that come from that community to say, hey, this really makes us afraid in society?
Yeah, and I sympathize with that because it's really just information. It does not do this. This does not change what gender you decide to affiliate as. Gender is something that you choose. Sex is fixed. So this just simply defines male and female, boy, girl, man, woman. It does not change anything that you identify with according to your gender.
Mm-hmm. I know you are a big proponent of school choice. You've seen a lot of movement in the school choice, and we can talk about that. But I wanted to specifically ask you about this legislation that you've been involved in about homeschoolers being able to attend and participate in basically workforce training programs at the high school level. Honestly, I didn't know that was inhibited at all. So talk about that issue and why it's important.
Right. So we have in our state placed a real emphasis on workforce development. We want our kids to be college or career ready when they graduate from high school. And we are putting more and more money into our career tech programs. They're very important because every child isn't necessarily set to go to college. That's not the right path for every child, nor do you need to go to college to be successful. So I found this really deficit going on because a constituent approached me in Shelby County, and the sophomore in high school he was homeschooled, and he wanted to attend part of the day at his career tech program in Shelby County. And he was not allowed to do that. And I thought, well, that just seems odd to me. So come to find out, every district has to opt in the way our law reads now and decide if they want homeschoolers to be able to attend. So given the emphasis on that, we've worked on this law, which would require school districts to allow homeschoolers to attend their career tech programs if there's room. So of course, if there's full and there's not room, that's fine. But we want to place an emphasis on the career tech programs, and there's no reason that the handful of homeschoolers out there shouldn't be able to participate in their county's program. That's something that's really hard to replicate in a homeschool environment.
Sure. And I mean, it shouldn't be necessarily a funding issue because homeschool parents pay those taxes too.
That's exactly right. That's right. It's not a funding issue at all. It's just an opportunity issue. And we're going to see more and more of these opportunities because I see going forward education being transformed in our state. And education is going to be tailor-made to fit each child. And it may be that a student is homeschooled but maybe goes to the local high school to take a French class or an accelerated math class, and maybe they pay a fee to do that. Or, there's a lot of different ways that we can do it. But education is going to be tailor-made. This one-size-fits-all public school is going to be transformed, and it's going to be life-changing for our students in the state of Alabama.
Well, a lot to look forward to in the upcoming legislative session. You ready?
I'm ready. I can't wait.
We'll be here before you know it. Representative DuBose, thanks again for coming on the show.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having us.
We'll be right back.
You can watch past episodes of Capitol Journal online anytime at Alabama Public Television's website, aptv.org. Click on the Online Video tab on the main page. You can also connect with Capitol Journal and link to past episodes on Capitol Journal's Facebook page.
Born in Fairfield, Alabama, Willie Mays is one of the greatest baseball players to ever play the game. In 22 Major League seasons, mostly with the New York and later San Francisco Giants, Mays had a 302 lifetime batting average and amassed 3,283 hits, 660 home runs, and an untouchable total of 7,095 career putouts from the outfield. Mays was the National League Rookie of the Year in 1951 and played a significant role in the New York Giants World Series victory in 1954. The most memorable moment in Mays' career occurred in the first game of that series when he made a running, over-the-shoulder catch at the warning track, popularly known as the catch. Mays earned 2 MVP awards, was awarded 12 Gold Gloves, made 24 All-Star Game appearances, and was a first-ballot Hall of Fame inductee in 1979. In 2015, President Barack Obama awarded Mays a Presidential Medal of Freedom.
You're watching Alabama Public Television.
Welcome back to Capitol Journal. Joining me next is Stephen Boyd, partner at Horizons Global Solutions. Stephen, thanks for coming back on Capitol Journal.
It's great to be here.
We're talking a lot about what's going on in Washington, D.C. You've been kind enough over the years to update us from D.C., but we finally have you here in studio, which is nice. And I'm interested in your perspective. You've been a chief of staff in the Senate. You've been a chief of staff in the House. You were Assistant Attorney General of the United States at the Department of Justice, now in the private sector. So you've seen administrations come, administrations go. Maybe we can start there. We've seen a Trump administration come into power before, 2017, right after his election then. Now it's 2025, and it's a different Trump administration coming in. I'm curious, what are the differences, similarities? What do you say?
Yeah, it's really night and day to the way it was on the first administration. That period was chaotic. It was a little disorganized. The transition team did not have many appointees lined up and ready to go on day one. But the biggest thing was Washington was, I think, trying to figure out what to do with Donald Trump. He had won and did quite well, obviously, in the election, but it was still this kind of outsider coming in, and the Republicans in Washington had to find a way to get along and figure each other out. Now is totally different. 63% of the House of Representatives has been elected since then. So what they've known as Donald Trump as the leader of the Republican Party. And he's shown up in town this time with, I think, more organization, more confidence, a level of comfort, and marched into the front door of the White House with a lot of confidence.
That's certainly the way it seems, just from afar, looking at it. And you've got a lot of momentum, or at least perceived momentum, from Trump himself, Republicans in the House and Senate, the MAGA movement, if you will, and all that. I mean, just really unprecedented that I've seen. And so there obviously all these executive orders, all this going on. Alex Engel reported on some of that. But I'm just reminded that for everything that they want to do, right, lots of plans, a lot of promises legislatively, there are constraints on what they can do.
Sure.
Because the House has a very slim majority. The Senate still has that cloture, 60 vote threshold to get over. So talk about that. Talk about how they will go about trying to legislate, try to, fulfill those promises, understanding that there are constraints on their majorities.
Well, that's exactly right. Trump won the popular vote, first Republican popular vote victory in 2 decades. He won back, the Republicans won back the Senate, they kept the House. And in that movement, there is a great deal of enthusiasm about pushing through an agenda and turning those agenda items into law. And he's been very aggressive in the first couple of days with executive orders and taken kind of an expansive view of presidential power. A lot of those orders will be caught up in litigation, and of course, any executive order can be overturned by the next administration.
Right.
Changing the law is very different. And that means he has to work through a congressional process. The biggest 2 points, which you've touched on a little bit, are in the House, there's only a 2-seat margin of error for Republicans. So 220 Republicans, and you need 218. And getting 218 politicians to decide on the lunch menu is very, very difficult. And they're talking about doing sweeping changes, and they're going to have to deliver almost every vote. And then on the Senate side, there's a filibuster rule. There's 60 votes required for most legislation. And at some point this year, I presume, that's all going to come into conflict with each other. Mm-hmm. This enthusiasm and motivation and momentum in the MAGA side with the realities of congressional legislating, which is a slow, difficult, tedious process.
Right. It's kind of designed to be that way.
Of course.
Well, we keep hearing this word reconciliation. And you mentioned, especially in the Senate, that threshold of 60 votes. I mean, it makes it tough to pass almost anything that's not truly, widespread support. But I guess it's each year that they have the opportunity to kind of get around that 60 vote threshold, and they're keep on talking about reconciliation for a large portion of the agenda. Can you explain how that works?
Yeah, it's a little in the weeds, but it's also very important. And when you talk about reconciliation, which is a word that will get thrown around a lot, it's really budget reconciliation. Okay. A lot of people leave out the budget part. And the way that works is the House and the Senate pass a budget resolution that sets spending priorities. And in that resolution, it instructs the various committees to go out and look for changes in the law that would be necessary to bring in the spending changes to compliance with the new budget resolution or to reconcile the law with the budget. And the reason why that's important is because of a budget law that was passed in the 70s that sets up this process. That those bills can be passed through the Senate with just a simple majority, and what we're talking about, the 60 vote threshold, would not apply. Now the catch is, to be eligible for that, it has to be truly a budget issue, a spending issue, a revenue issue, or a debt issue. And so the person who gets to decide that is the Senate parliamentarian. Now what's going on in Washington right now in Republican circles on the Hill is trying to figure out the strategy. Do we try to do this all at once, which is what the House wants to do? They want to put a tax extension, immigration, border security, and an energy reform bill.
One big beautiful bill.
One big beautiful bill. And the thinking there is, well, it's so difficult in the House to get the votes to 218, we can just do it once. The senators, at least some of them, would prefer to parse that out into a couple different phases. Go ahead and score some points on border security, which most people agree with, get those points on the board, then come back in another phase and do taxes and energy. How that shakes out depends a lot on what the White House thinks is the best way forward.
It's a good explanation because, that word does get thrown out a lot, and understand, it's just not anything. No. You don't get to do anything. It's got to be within those parameters. I want to switch gears and talk about confirmations. We're seeing the start of the confirmations process. Really, it started before Trump took office because, those hearings had already begun.
Right.
You've been through a confirmations process as a presidential appointee in the previous Trump term, but you also have experience in the Senate preparing senators for those hearings and everything. Can you kind of talk about a little bit behind the scenes what happens in that process? And do you see any of these Trump nominees actually not getting confirmed, or do you think most of them will be successful?
When it comes to the cabinet picks, the very top level, my assessment is they're probably all going to get through, with possibly one exception. I think Tulsi Gabbard, for Director of National Intelligence, still has some issues that are kind of causing concern. But some of the picks which were announced back in November and December, they had some issues, but they took a step in the process, which is to go meet with individual senators behind closed doors. They took advantage of that, and I think put a lot of those concerns to rest. From the senator's perspective, senators can vote yes or no. If you're in the party of power that is the same as the new president, a no vote is a very significant thing. You're going to do that only if you just really can't get to yes. Most senators in that situation take the view that the president, who just won an election, has the right to have the people around him that he or she chooses. And right now we have the cabinet picks for the top spots. I think they'll get through. Down the ranks, that may change. There are a lot of positions that require Senate confirmation.
Right. And Marco Rubio went through 99-0, which is unanimous. And but he's a senator. He has those relationships.
Sure.
Might not see that exact kind of same thing going
No,
forward.
there'll be close votes on all of them, I would suspect, forward. He gets not a free pass, but definitely got some deference. I think moving forward, you're going to see a lot of 51, 52, 53 votes, and some others that will get some more Democratic support also.
Yeah. I want to ask you about committees, because during that confirmations process, we saw our two senators, Tommy Tuberville and Katie Britt, really play a leading role. Tuberville on the Armed Services part, Britt on the Judiciary part. And on the Judiciary part, it was highlighting really her new committee.
Yep.
So that's some of the new news out of D.C. and for our delegation is that Britt has taken a seat on the powerful Senate Judiciary Committee. And on the House side, you have Dale Strong, who went from Armed Services to the Appropriations Committee, another appropriator for Alabama. So given your experience on the Hill, talk about the significance of those two committee gains, if you will, for the state.
Yeah, if you look at Senator Britt's committee roster, you've got appropriations, which is incredibly important. We'll talk about that in a moment. You've got banking. You've got the Rules Committee, which is very important. And then now she's added Judiciary. And I think that's a really a list that you could really just ever dream to have, honestly. It's such a strong set of committees. And on Judiciary specifically, that committee, which I think is probably the toughest committee in terms of the personalities involved. Most of them are lawyers. They know how to question witnesses. It's very argumentative and usually in a productive way. They have oversight over all of the criminal laws of the nation, or most of them, but also oversight of confirming judges and U.S. attorneys, and the hearing you're referring to, the Attorney General of the United States. So that is a very powerful position. Senator Britt's a lawyer. It's perfect for her. She's great at it. Mm-hmm. And then on appropriations in the House, Dale Strong was on the Armed Services Committee, but got an opportunity as a very still junior member, and he's only one term in, to jump over to the Appropriations Committee, which is, I think, a testament really to kind of how he's viewed in the conference as a workhorse and somebody who's there to help and to figure out solutions and get things done, which is certainly, in my opinion, his personality. That's important for Huntsville.
Yeah.
But it's also
think of all that's going on in Huntsville.
Sure, of course. And with time, I'm sure he will be trying to get on the subcommittee that handles defense. But he's on CJS now, which, for example, the J in CJS is Justice. That's controls FBI funding, huge influx of FBI assets moving to Huntsville for the second headquarters there. So that's just one example. But statewide, anybody in the state can come to him and ask for help on projects that are important to state and the economy and security and those sort of things.
Yeah, big committee upgrades for the state of Alabama. I've always said our delegation tends to punch above its weight.
I agree.
When it comes to influence in Washington. It looks like that's continuing.
I agree.
Yeah. Stephen, we're out of time. Thanks again for joining me in studio. We'll look forward to your columns every so often in Alabama Daily News. And thanks again.
My pleasure.
We'll be right back.
You can watch past episodes of Capital Journal online at video.aptv.org. Capital Journal episodes are also available on APTV's free mobile app. You can also connect with Capital Journal and link to past episodes on Capital Journal's Facebook page. And you can listen to past episodes of Capital Journal when you're driving or on the go with Capital Journal podcasts.
Alabama Public Television is your place for quality educational services. free professional development for educators and childcare providers, access to free curriculum-aligned videos, lesson plans, and instructional resources with PBS Learning Media, and all the PBS Kids programs parents know and trust. Learn something new every day with Alabama Public Television. Visit us at aptv.org/education to learn more.
Rosa Parks is one of the most enduring symbols of the American civil rights era of the mid-20th century. She was active in the Montgomery chapter of the NAACP, serving as its field secretary. Although she was not the first Black woman in Montgomery to be arrested for doing so, her 1955 arrest for violating the segregation ordinance by refusing to give up her bus seat to a white man triggered a 382-day boycott of Montgomery city buses and prompted a challenge of the ordinance's constitutionality in federal court. In December 1956, after the U.S. Supreme Court affirmed a district court ruling against segregation, Parks took a symbolic victory ride near the front of a city bus. Parks continued to work for civil rights causes throughout her life and was awarded the nation's highest honors for her role in the movement.
Welcome back to Capitol Journal. The Blackburn Institute at the University of Alabama is a leadership, development, and civic engagement program specifically focused on improving the state of Alabama. Through its work with students, alumni, and advisory board members, the Institute develops a network of leaders who have a clear understanding of the state's challenges. And joining me now, next, is Jerran Hill, Executive Director of the Blackburn Institute, and Hannah Adams, a senior currently involved in the program. Welcome. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you, Todd.
Well, I really appreciated being invited to your event last night. It was a really interesting panel discussion about some of the issues facing Alabama, but really good questions from the students and the audience as well. But Jerran, I wanted to start with you and maybe give us a little history about the Blackburn Institute and what its role is on campus and throughout the state.
Yes, I'd be happy to. So our namesake is Dr. John L. Blackburn, who was the Dean of Men at the university in the 1960s. And so he really paved the way for the desegregation of the university. And when he retired, several of his former students who had been impacted by his mentorship and leadership, they decided they wanted to start this organization to preserve his legacy of developing students as leaders and agents of positive change. And so we are now in our 30th year, and so we have over 900 alumni throughout the state of Alabama and beyond. And we really are focused on how we can learn about our challenges in the state of Alabama and give our students the tools. And so we want to prepare our students as leaders on campus, but really we want them to be leaders in industry and government and be able to really impact change on a larger level in the decades ahead.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have several friends that went through Blackburn, and you know, they're not shy about it. They let you hear about it, and so I've known about it for a long time, but the last couple of years being able to come to some of y'all's functions has been really interesting. Well, Hannah, let me ask you, as a current senior, somebody who's involved in the program as a student right now, what has the impact been on you? What's your perspective?
I always tell people that it is one of my most favorite experiences that I've had in college. I think first and foremost, the community that I've gained. I'm surrounded by people from all walks of life across campus who have different ideas than me, and I am able to learn from that. But also what Mr. Hill, said, having the mentorship from fellows is huge. It's led to internships and job opportunities. And I think what's special about Blackburn is that it's that lifetime commitment. It's growing you as a person, as a student, but then it's going to extend beyond that. Something that we call is you have a call to action. And so it's discovering what is your call to action. And that, to me, is understanding your why in life. Why am I here? What's my purpose? And how can I impact people through that. And I think that Blackburn uniquely gives you the tools to do that because you become aware of the issues that the state is facing, and you're able to hear from different stakeholders involved. You're able to go travel the state and actually have those experiences. You're not just reading about it, but you're actually going and asking the questions and doing something about it, not just in your college life, but something beyond that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mentioned the event last night, which was a panel discussion, and you talk about, addressing challenges. I found the questions y'all were asking so enlightening because it really spoke to how engaged y'all already are. These weren't surface level questions. They were pretty deep. We had to think about them as those who were trying to answer them. What else have y'all been doing in the capital city this week?
So we've had the opportunity, last night we had a state legislative preview, so hearing about hot button topics that are going to be in this session, what to look out for, and I think, we heard from various groups who had different issues that they're advocating for, but then today we've had the opportunity to hear a panel on the criminal justice system, on healthcare, and then also on K through 12 education. And I think what's really special about this trip in particular, this is my third time here, and every single time I walk away with something different because there's no two panels alike. We're always talking about a different issue and walking away with more knowledge before, but then we also have the opportunity to discuss it with our peers afterwards and say, well, what did you think about this? Mm-hmm. And the students that are involved in Blackburn, we have open minds. We're wanting to listen, we're wanting to learn and have open hearts to that. And so then we're able to take that knowledge back to our campus.
It's so interesting that y'all talk so much about alumni because it seems to me that so many great college organizations, wonderful experiences while you're on campus kind of ends with the cap and gown. So talk about the importance of alumni in Blackburn and why that's so critical to the organization.
So one of our overarching values is this idea of networking through the generations. We understand that Alabama has some challenges that are persistent, and it's going to take folks with different viewpoints from different walks of life and different stages of their life. And so having fellows who have that lifetime commitment not only inspires the current students, but it's really gratifying for me to be able to see some of our fellows in our nation's capital, working here in the State House, and even in their local communities that are trying to push the ball a little bit further, move that needle to make things a little bit better. And so we really place a premium on that. And your experience in Blackburn doesn't really get started till you become a fellow, and so that's really where we hope to see the big impact.
That's interesting. Seeing the long game. It's not just about college, but beyond. That's unique. I think most colleges would be well served to mimic a program like this, and that's saying something coming from an Auburn guy. Well, Hannah, I can't help but ask you, as a senior, what are you thinking about career-wise after graduation, and really how maybe Blackburn has impacted that?
I think the mentorship that I've had in Blackburn from the fellows and also just from the amazing staff and faculty that we have in the Blackburn Institute has played a large role in shaping what I want to do in the future. So I've always had an interest in shaping some sort of policy, whether it be on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C., or right here in Montgomery. But I really wasn't sure where I fit into that. And so I went into Blackburn having that passion, but Blackburn has helped shape that. I'm really interested in healthcare policy. I'm a cancer survivor, so I have a personal lived experience there that has made me passionate about that cause. And Blackburn has cheered me on in that, and they've helped connect me with different opportunities to further that mission. And so I'll be staying at Alabama for my MBA, finishing that up next May, and then after that, seeing where life takes me, but I would love to continue working in the policy sphere. Yeah, absolutely. Something tells me plenty of opportunities await. Well, look, we're out of time, but thanks so much for coming on the show. I'm excited about the future of Blackburn and look forward to catching up more in the future.
Thank you, Todd.
Thank you.
We'll be right back.
You can watch past episodes of Capitol Journal online anytime at Alabama Public Television's website, aptv.org. Click on the Online Video tab on the main page. You can also connect with Capitol Journal and link to past episodes on Capitol Journal's Facebook page.
Getting my hands dirty is the best part of my job. My name is Hannah Rogers, and I am an A&P mechanic, which is an airframe and power plant mechanic. I can work on anything from general aviation to helicopters. I was a young mother. I was 18 when I became pregnant. I never thought that I could finish school, work, and raise my son. But with the government's assistance with food stamps, Section 8, child care, all of those programs have helped me achieve this goal to where I don't have to live off assistance anymore. I was able to graduate debt-free by the Pell Grant, the WIOA program, and also a scholarship. I actually had friends tell me about the program, the WIOA program, and so then I also spoke with the SSS instructor at our school, and she told me to contact the Career Center, and I was able to set up an appointment and fill out the application and all the prereqs for that. With the WIOA program providing for my scholarship for school, along with the Pell Grant, that all gave me opportunities that I wouldn't have been able to reach my goals and be where I am today without those programs. You don't just have to stay in poverty because you was born in poverty. You can move up in life. Just because you don't have the money doesn't mean that you can't get there. There's a lot of opportunities out there. There's scholarships, there's programs, there's people. You just have to show that you're willing to do the hard work. I was determined. I refused to allow anything to stop me.
Montgomery native Percy L. Julian was an internationally acclaimed chemist. The third African American to receive a PhD in chemistry, he specialized in the chemistry of natural products and their synthesis in the laboratory. This technology is very important in medicines, food products, paints, and firefighting foams, among other things. Julian received many awards, including election to the National Academy of Sciences and the National Inventors Hall of Fame.
That's our show for this week. Thanks for watching. We'll be back next week at the same time, right here on Alabama Public Television. For our Capitol Journal team, I'm Todd Stacy. We'll see you next time.